Dialectical behavior therapy was built on a simple and radical premise that people can learn skills, that the behaviors and emotional responses that are causing the most suffering, the ones that feel most out of control, most automatic, most impossible to change through willpower or insight alone, are not fixed character traits. They are patterns. And patterns can be interrupted, redirected, and replaced with something that works better. Marsha Linehan, who developed DBT at the University of Washington in the late 1980s, originally as a treatment for chronically suicidal women, built the most comprehensive, most practically organized therapeutic skill set in the history of psychotherapy. The skills she assembled, drawn from cognitive behavioral therapy, Zen mindfulness practice, behavioral science, and her own hard-won clinical and personal wisdom, now have decades of research support across a remarkable range of conditions: borderline personality disorder, eating disorders, PTSD, substance use, depression, anxiety, and virtually any clinical presentation that involves difficulty tolerating distress and regulating emotion. But here is the thing about a large, comprehensive skill set: its size can itself become a barrier. People who encounter DBT for the first time and see the full scope of what it contains can feel overwhelmed rather than equipped. Which skills are for which moments? What do you reach for when you are flooded? What do you practice when things are calm so that the skills are available when they aren't? Today, we are answering those questions. We are touring the 4 core DBT modules: mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, and spotlighting the skills that are most powerful, most practically usable, and most important to understand. The full DBT skills alphabet reference is linked in the description. Let's begin. Section 1. What DBT is and why skills are central. DBT rests on a foundational dialectic, the tension it is named for, between two equally important and apparently contradictory truths: that you are doing the best you can and that you need to do better. That who you are right now is completely understandable given everything that has shaped you, and that the life you want requires change. Both are simultaneously true, and holding both without collapsing into either, without the self-invalidation of you, are broken and need to be fixed, or the self-defeat of I am fine the way I am and nothing needs to change, is itself one of the most therapeutic things DBT teaches. The biosocial theory, Linehan's framework for understanding the origins of the emotion dysregulation that DBT treats, is foundational here. In the biosocial model, chronic emotional dysregulation develops through the transaction between a biologically sensitive person and a pervasively invalidating environment, an environment that consistently communicates that the person's emotional experience is wrong, excessive, or simply not real. The person who grew up in this environment has learned both to distrust their own emotional experience and to lack the skills for managing it effectively, because those skills were never modeled, taught, or supported. This is why skills are not an add-on to DBT. They are the treatment. The skills do not supplement insight. They create capability. The person who has insight into why they become flooded but no skills for what to do when flooded is not better equipped than before the insight. The skills are what make insight actionable. DBT organizes its skills into 4 modules, each targeting a different dimension of the functioning that emotional dysregulation impairs. And critically, Linehan is explicit that all 4 modules are necessary. No single module is sufficient on its own, because effective living requires all 4 capacities: the awareness of mindfulness, the crisis survival of distress tolerance, the emotional management of emotional regulation, and the relational competence of interpersonal effectiveness. Section 2, Module 1, Mindfulness, the foundation of everything. Mindfulness is not the first module of DBT because it is the gentlest or the most accessible. It is first because it is the foundation on which every other skill is built. Without mindfulness, without the basic capacity to observe one's own experience with some degree of awareness and without being entirely commanded by it, the other skills cannot be reliably accessed or used. In DBT, mindfulness is not meditation in the traditional sense, though meditation can be a vehicle for it. Mindfulness in DBT is a set of skills, observable, learnable, practicable skills, organized around two questions: what do you do and how do you do it? The what skills are observe, describe, and participate. The how skills are non-judgmentally, one mindfully and effectively. Observe means noticing what is happening in your experience right now, internally and externally, without immediately evaluating or reacting to it. Describe means putting words to what you observe, without adding interpretation or judgment. Participate means engaging fully in what you are doing, the opposite of being half present, half somewhere else, which is the default state of the dysregulated mind. But perhaps the most clinically important and most foundational mindfulness concept in all of DBT is wise mind. Linehan describes three states of mind: emotion mind, in which the person is entirely governed by emotion, reactive, all feeling, no perspective; reasonable mind, in which the person is entirely governed by logic and rationality, analytical, detached, no feeling; and wise mind, the synthesis of both, the state in which the person can feel what they feel and think what they think, and access the deep, integrated knowing that draws on both. Wise mind is not a compromise between emotion and reason. It is what becomes available when both are present simultaneously. And the cultivation of wise mind, the practice of accessing that integrated state, is at the core of what DBT mindfulness is building. Every other DBT skill is used more effectively from wise mind. Distress tolerance skills require enough observing presence to choose them rather than react. Emotional regulation skills require enough perspective to apply them. Interpersonal effectiveness skills require both the warmth of emotional presence and the clarity of rational thought. Mindfulness is the prerequisite. It is not where the work ends. It is where it becomes possible to begin. Section 3, Module 2, Distress Tolerance, Surviving the Crisis. Distress tolerance skills are for the moments when the wave is already here. When the crisis is happening, the emotion is peaked, the window of tolerance has been exceeded, and the goal is not to feel better, not to solve the problem, not to make the distress go away. The goal is to get through it without making things worse. This is the module that addresses the most acute clinical need, and the one whose framing most directly challenges the cultural assumption that negative emotion must be immediately resolved. Distress tolerance says, sometimes the most skillful thing you can do is survive the moment intact and not burn down your life in the process of escaping the feeling. That is not a small thing. For many people, it is the most difficult thing. The accept skill is one of the most widely used distress tolerance tools, a set of crisis survival strategies organized as an acronym: activities, contributing, comparisons, emotions, pushing away, thoughts, sensations. The common principle running through each strategy is distraction, and DBT is explicit that distraction is a legitimate, clinically valid tool when used intentionally and temporarily. When emotional intensity is so high that engaging with the problem would be destabilizing, temporarily redirecting attention gives the physiological arousal time to drop before returning to the issue. The distinction is between distraction as a permanent avoidance strategy, which maintains suffering, and distraction as a temporary regulation tool, which creates a window for skillful engagement. TIPP, temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, progressive relaxation, is one of the most physiologically direct distress tolerance skills available, and it is one whose mechanism is worth understanding precisely. Each of these strategies works directly on the autonomic nervous system to reduce the physiological arousal that is driving the emotional intensity. Cold water on the face activates the dive reflex, rapidly slowing heart rate. Intense exercise metabolizes the stress hormones flooding the system. Paced breathing, extending the exhale longer than the inhale, activates the vagal brake on cardiac acceleration. TIP does not require insight, motivation, or the capacity for complex thinking. It works at the level of the body, which is where the crisis is happening. Radical acceptance, which we have explored in depth in another video in this series, is the most profound and most challenging distress tolerance skill. The complete, whole-body acknowledgement of reality exactly as it is, without fighting what cannot be changed. It is the skill that lives in the gap between pain and suffering, between what has happened and what we add to it through our refusal to accept that it happened. Radical acceptance is not approval. It is not resignation. It is the most direct route available from suffering to pain, which is already hard enough, but survivable. The self-soothe skill, deliberately engaging the 5 senses to create comfort and reduce physiological distress, belongs to distress tolerance's self-compassion dimension, the practice of treating yourself with the kindness you would offer someone you love who was in genuine distress.
A warm bath, a particular smell, music that soothes, something pleasant to taste, something soft to touch. These are not trivial. They are deliberate activations of the parasympathetic nervous system through sensory channels, clinically grounded in the same neuroscience that underlies every other somatic regulation tool. Section 4, Module 3. Emotional regulation, changing the emotional climate. If distress tolerance is for surviving the storm, emotional regulation is for managing the weather, the longer-term work of reducing vulnerability to emotional dysregulation, increasing positive emotional experiences, and changing emotional states when they are interfering with the person's ability to live according to their values. The first and most foundational emotional regulation skill in DBT is identifying and naming emotions, which sounds simpler than it is. Research by Matthew Lieberman and colleagues at UCLA demonstrated that putting feelings into words, affect labeling, reduces amygdala activation and increases prefrontal cortex regulation. Naming the emotion is not merely descriptive, it is regulatory. The person who can say, "I am feeling shame right now," specifically shame, not just overwhelmed, has created a tiny but real distance between themselves and the emotion that changes their relationship to it. Emotion identification is not where emotional regulation ends. It is where it becomes possible. PLEASE is a DBT acronym that addresses the biological vulnerabilities that make emotional dysregulation more likely, and its premise is foundational. The nervous system that is malnourished, sleep-deprived, physically ill, under the influence of substances, or undertreated for medical conditions is a nervous system that is structurally less capable of emotional regulation, regardless of the skills the person has learned. PLEASE stands for treating physical illness, eating balanced meals, avoiding mood-altering substances, sleeping sufficiently, and exercising. These are not lifestyle suggestions. They are physiological prerequisites for emotional regulation. Without the biological foundation, the psychological skills are working against a significant headwind. Opposite action is one of DBT's most clinically powerful emotional regulation tools and one of its most counterintuitive. The premise is this: every emotion has an action urge associated with it. Fear urges avoidance. Shame urges hiding. Anger urges attack. Depression urges withdrawal and inactivity. And these action urges, when followed, maintain and reinforce the emotion because the nervous system learns from behavioral feedback. Opposite action says, when the emotion is not warranted by the facts of the situation, or when acting on the urge would make things worse, act opposite to the urge. Approach what fear says to avoid. Engage what depression says to withdraw from. The action, when done fully and repeatedly, changes the emotion. Not because it suppresses it, but because it removes the behavioral reinforcement that was sustaining it. Check the facts is the cognitive cousin of opposite action, the skill of examining whether the emotional response is proportionate to the actual facts of the situation, as distinct from the interpretation of the situation. Emotions are responses to interpretations, not to raw facts. And the interpretation that is driving an intense emotional response is frequently an assumption, a projection, or a cognitive distortion, rather than an accurate reading of what is actually happening. Check the facts asks, what is the actual fact, and what is my added interpretation? This is not invalidation of the emotion. It is precision, and precision creates choice. Building mastery, the regular engagement in activities that create a genuine sense of competence and effectiveness, is an emotional regulation skill whose importance is easy to underestimate. The person who has a relationship with their own capability, who does things they are good at, who challenges themselves at the edge of their skill in ways that produce genuine growth, is building a foundation of self-efficacy that reduces vulnerability to emotional dysregulation over time. It is not about productivity or achievement in the performance sense. It is about the neurological and psychological benefit of regular, genuine competence experience. Section 5, Module 4, Interpersonal Effectiveness, Relationships that Work. The Interpersonal Effectiveness module addresses what is perhaps the most important and most complex terrain in emotional regulation: other people. Because the most intense emotional experiences most people have are relational. They happen in the context of the people who matter most to them, and the skills for navigating those relational contexts effectively are as specific and as learnable as any other DBT skill. Dear Man is the DBT skill for asking for what you need, or saying no to what you don't, for making requests and setting limits in a way that increases the probability of getting your needs met while maintaining the relationship. Describe the situation, express how you feel, assert what you want, reinforce the other person's willingness to meet your request, stay mindful of your objectives, appear confident, and negotiate. The acronym is not the point. The principle is, effective interpersonal communication is a skill. It has components, and those components can be practiced. Being clear, direct, and respectful in stating your needs is not natural for everyone. It is learned, and it can be learned. Give is the relational maintenance skill, the skills for keeping the relationship healthy while you are also advocating for your own needs. Be gentle, act interested, validate the other person's experience, and use an easy manner. Give is the reminder that the relationship itself is of value, not just a vehicle for getting needs met, and that how you pursue your objectives affects whether the relationship survives the pursuit. Fast is the self-respect skill for interpersonal situations, the skills for maintaining your own integrity and self-respect in interactions that may be difficult or pressured. Be fair to yourself and others. Don't apologize for having needs or values. Stick to your values and be truthful. Fast addresses the specific vulnerability of the person who sacrifices their own self-respect in the attempt to maintain relationships or reduce conflict, and names clearly that a self-respect that is abandoned in every difficult interaction is a self-respect that does not exist in any useful sense. Validation is one of the most clinically important and most broadly applicable interpersonal effectiveness skills, and it is one whose clinical depth often surprises people who first encounter it as simply listening. Linehan describes 6 levels of validation, from the most surface level of paying attention through to the most profound level of radical genuineness. The communication that the person's response makes complete sense given who they are and what they have been through. Validation is not agreement. It is the communication that the other person's experience is real and understandable. And the experience of being genuinely validated, of having your inner experience acknowledged as real and comprehensible, is one of the most therapeutically powerful experiences available in human relationship. Section 6. Using the skills together. The most important thing to understand about DBT skills is not any individual skill, but the relationship between the 4 modules and the way in which they are designed to work as an integrated system rather than as a menu of isolated techniques. Mindfulness is the foundation, the capacity to observe experience without being consumed by it that makes every other skill accessible rather than theoretical. Without mindfulness, the other skills cannot reliably be reached in the moments they are most needed, because the flooded, reactive mind that has lost observing capacity is also a mind that cannot access and deploy a learned skill set. Distress tolerance is for the acute moments when the emotion is peaked and the goal is survival without escalation. It is not the permanent solution. It is the bridge across the crisis to a moment in which the other skills become available. Emotional regulation is the longer-term work, reducing the frequency and intensity of emotional crises through biological foundation, skill practice, and the gradual building of an emotional life that is less dominated by extremes. And interpersonal effectiveness is where the skills meet the world, where the capacity built in mindfulness, the stability built in regulation, and the crisis survival built in distress tolerance get expressed in the relationships that matter most and that most reliably test everything the person has been building. The DBT Skills Alphabet resource in the description is a comprehensive, organized reference for this entire skill set, organized from A to Z so that no matter where you are in the system, you have a practical, accessible tool for finding what you need. It is designed for personal practice and for therapists using DBT skills in clinical work. It is in the description, and it belongs in your toolkit. Marsha Linehan built DBT from an understanding that is both clinically rigorous and deeply human, that the people who struggle most with their emotions are not broken. They are people who were never taught how to handle what they feel, who grew up in environments that did not give them what they needed to develop the skills that the rest of us assume are simply there, and who, given the right skills, the right support, and the right practice, can build a life that is genuinely worth living. That phrase, a life worth living, is not incidental to DBT. It is its stated goal, not symptom reduction, not behavioral compliance, not the elimination of emotional experience.
A life that the person themselves can call worth living, on their own terms, with the full complexity of who they are. The skills are the means. You are the goal. And the distance between where you are right now and the life that is genuinely worth living to you is a distance that skills can close. One practiced moment, one survived crisis, one relationship repaired or honestly set at limit at a time. The DBT Skills Alphabet is in the description. Take it, use it, bring it into your practice or your sessions, and I will see you in the next one.